So I was listening to or reading, probably listening to some content the other day because that's what I do. Normally, when I'm not providing it myself, I'm listening to some of my favorite content providers in this space. In this space, believe it or not. And every now and then, there's something that comes up that really sparks. And ignite something in me where I want to go do more research on it. And I heard a term the other day, which I resonated with. And that was that we all get what we imagine. We all get what we imagine. I want to give credit to the speaker in this case. And I don't know if he was borrowing that from someone else, but the content creator's title is Edward Art, A-R-T. Edward Art. He's on YouTube. Really, really deep thinker. And I know he does some stuff on Reddit. But I want to make sure he gets credit for it. So I listen to him quite often, and it is really challenging sometimes. So I have to listen to it multiple times. But this really resonated with me, and it created space in me to go out and to do some research. So that's exactly what I did. And so what we're going to talk about today is really, what are you imagining? And the bigger thing and the scientific studies and the different things that I'm going to bring to you today has to do with why is it so much easier. And I know you've thought about this. Why is it so much easier for us to think negatively versus positively? And it's biological, and I'm going to explain it to you in just a few minutes. But it is. On top of that, there's a tremendous amount of programming that goes into ensuring that we are fearful of certain things just so we can be controlled as a group, as a people. Okay? So the benefit in terms of listening today is we're going to understand how to unwind, how to unknot and get out of some of this programming. And once we understand why it is that it's easier for us to think negatively versus positively, then we're going to understand why it is that it's so important for us to be imagining positivity as opposed to negativity. I think that'll change some behaviors. Because at the end of the day, you are and you get what you think about. There are numerous quotes I'm going to bring to you in a few minutes, numerous quotes, scriptures, etc., that talk about the power of your thought, the power of your imagination, and the fact that the more you dwell on something, you can go all the way back to when you were a small kid, when you heard the term where your energy goes, where your focus goes, your energy flows. I always think of a microscope or a magnifying glass when that comes up, because I remember being a very small kid and everybody's tried to deal with the magnifying glass outside with the sun rays and how it heats up and it can burn up a piece of paper or ants or whatever you were doing. That's what I think about when it comes to our focus and our energy. Well, what happens when you send your energy somewhere? Well, it's going to expand. It's going to expand. There can be very simple scenarios where you are very focused on a project. You're closing everything out. You're very focused on a project. It can be scenarios where you are very focused on gambling. You've heard stories, I have, where people are in casinos, Vegas, for days on end. They don't even realize what time it is. Why? Because they're so focused on the gambling. They've locked everything else out. You can get focused on very positive things that can bring very positive returns in your life. That is the whole point. Let's take this mechanism that we already have and use it for good. We're using it anyway. Let's use it to direct ourselves into the goals and achievements and the accomplishments that we want in our lives. All right, so that's what we're talking about today. But before we get started, I did get a text from our new friend. I don't think she's a new listener. She didn't say, but her name is Jeannie. She is in Houston, I believe. I know it was Texas, but I think it's Houston. She sent me a really nice note the other day. As a matter of fact, let me jump over here and let me see if I can pull it up really quick. So Jeannie is out of Houston, Houston, Texas. And she says, hey, Kelly, you mentioned the 30 or 31 days to a new beginning program, but I don't see it in the link in the show. So please let me know where to look for. I'm really enjoying the podcast. Well, Jeannie, first of all, thank you for reaching out, and I really appreciate the kind words. And as a matter of fact, while I'm talking about this, I'm going to put your comment as all of them come up, everybody who's texting us. It's on our website. So whenever you text us and send us information, kudos and stuff, it goes up on our website. So if you want to see that, you can just jump into the show notes as well and check out the link to our podcast website. But to answer your question, Jeannie, and to ensure that everybody knows how to access our 31 Days to New Beginning, there is a link. And I apologize if some shows are not getting it. I have to go back yesterday and to ensure, because here's what happened. I mean, there's a lot of detail. I'm sure you don't care. But there's a default message that is supposed to go into every show, so I don't have to retype all of this. And I had to go back yesterday to ensure that that's exactly what was happening. Some cases, yes, some cases, no. But at the end of the day, all you have to do, depending on where you're listening to us, if you are on YouTube, then you go down into the comments or to the description, it's going to be there. If you're on the podcast platform, it doesn't matter which platform you're on, go down into the show notes. You should see something that says 31 Days to New Beginning online course and a link. And the link takes you straight over to our provider, which is Udemy, and you can review it. You can kind of look at some sample videos, et cetera, and you can purchase it there. There are also other ways to support the podcast. I want you to go to our digital marketplace, to our podcast website, and that's going to kind of show you everything. So what I'm going to do, I think I probably got too many links here. What I'm going to do is create one link eventually, and eventually means in the next week or so that you can just click on the one link and then determine from there where you want to go. Kind of like a link tree. My preference is that you go to our podcast website and go from there. But thank you, Jeannie, for listening, number one. Thank all of you for listening. But thank you so much for sending those kind words. And if any of you would like to text us, reach out to us, you can do so. I'm going to start putting my email address in the show notes as well, because I really would like to have these one-on-one conversations. If it's something that I can do for you immediately, I'll do that. But I didn't have your email, Jeannie, and there's no way for me to respond back to the text message. So anyway, thanks for the fan mail. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, please do so. And let's get going with what we have for today. So let me remind you what we're talking about. This is the idea of imagining, the power of imagining. Everyone, because here's the statement that launched me into thinking about this. The statement is, everyone gets what they're imagining. And the context is sometimes we have a tendency to believe that some people are better off or worse off than we are. But because Edward, who is a follower of Neville Goddard, Neville believed that the imagination is the key to the creation, to manifestation. So it really depends on what you are imagining. And since we all use this imagination, we're getting whatever we imagine. Now, the truth of it is some of us don't realize, some of us are not conscious of the power of our imagination. So what happens? We are creating out of default. We're creating situations and circumstances that we really don't desire, because we are imagining worst case scenarios. A lot of us are pessimistic. A lot of us are in this state of just negativity. And the more we let those tapes roll in our mind, the more we are creating those sorts of scenarios, which of course prove to us that we're true. We're right. We're correct in thinking this, because look, it has manifested. What we don't realize is that it's manifested simply because we are creating it. So let me prove to you why it is easier to think negatively versus positively. There are studies that have been done, and there's something called a negative bias. Okay, so there is something called a negative bias that has to do with our minds, the way that we think, and it's a protective mechanism. It's tied to fight or flight. So scientists call this phenomena negative bias. Our minds are wired to give more weight to negative thoughts than positive ones. It's rooted in biology and psychology. The basis or the bias evolved as a survival mechanism, and it helped our ancestors to stay alert to danger. Okay, so again, the fight or flight. So this is sort of part of our reptilian brain where it helps us to survive. Well, in modern day, though, it often leads us to unnecessary stress, right? Unnecessary stress, anxiety, and a focus on problems rather than the possibilities. So while at one point in our history, it was very necessary to have this, you know, negative bias because we needed to see what the outcome could be. Could I be eaten by this? Could I eat it? Would I be hurt by this? Would I be killed by this? So you kind of were always thinking about the negative side of what could happen based on what you're going to do. Excuse me. Nowadays, you're thinking about it internally, but you're not trying to kill a mountain lion, or you're not trying to traverse across a desert, or do something that's necessary for your survival per se. You're simply entertaining thoughts about your future, about your health, about your relationship, about your career, about your entrepreneurship, right? What does it do? It leads into unnecessary stress. Why? We're building scenarios of this not working out. We're building scenarios of the doctor coming out and telling us the worst case scenario. We're building scenarios of our spouses not being faithful. We're building scenarios of worst case, events that are going to affect us negatively. Now, the problem with that is, even though these events haven't happened, and some of them, hopefully none of them, will happen, our bodies and minds don't know that. So you get the stress, you get the anxiety, you get the depression. And if you continue with this negative talk, you're going to get the end result. So let's talk about the cost of this type of mindset. Well, number one, the stress and anxiety is going to increase. It's going to have an impact on your physical body. Number two, it's going to reduce, and here's a significant thing, not that the other two are not, it's going to reduce problem-solving ability. So when you're trapped in negative thinking, you're not thinking possibilities, you're thinking problem-oriented. You ever heard of being problem-oriented instead of solution-oriented? People who are constantly thinking negatively usually are problem-oriented. They're not really focused on the solution, they're more concerned with the problem. Now, you would think that a person who has a problem would want and desire a solution. Not true most of the time. If you take the problem away, if you solve it, then they don't have anything to complain about. The deal is, a negative thinker is usually concentrated on problems. So we tend to see obstacles rather than solutions if you're in that mindset or in that state. So research indicates that focusing on problems narrows our perspective and it makes it harder to find creative solutions. Again, research shows that focusing on problems narrows our perspective. So all these different opportunities may be out there, but you're so focused on the problem, you're not paying any attention to these solutions. Just like being in the casino. You're sitting at that table or you're at the slot machine. God knows what's going on around you because you're here. Your focus is only here. Next, this could lead to self-fulfilling prophecies, which is what we don't want, particularly if it's negative. The more we imagine negative outcomes, the more likely they are to make choices, people that is, make choices that align with those beliefs. So the more you concentrate on these actions, you got this self-talk going, the more you to kind of pull it off. So this is known as a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you constantly imagine failure, you're less motivated to take action, which can lead to that very outcome. If you think, this particular diagnosis is something that I can't come back from, I can't be healed, then you don't take any action. And then eventually you could, digress into a situation where, you're going to, be extinct because you didn't take any action at all. So let's talk about strategies for rewiring your brain to positivity. Well, I'll tell you, before we do that, I said I was going to prove to you that these are scientific studies, and I want to do that. So we talked about negative bias. So let's talk about some studies that actually prove what I'm telling you is true. And that way you can go out and study and show yourself approved to ensure what I'm telling you is correct, because I don't want you to believe me or anybody else that has a microphone. You are responsible for what you believe. So here's study number one. It is entitled Negativity Bias and Evolutionary Roots. It's evolutionary roots. This was done in 2001. The review is written in General Psychology. The summary of the study is as follows. The study explains the evolutionary origins of negative bias, emphasizing that negative events have a greater impact on the mind than positive ones. By understanding this bias, we can actively counterbalance it with positive practices, which of course we're going to talk about a little later. Again, this was by someone named Roy F. Baumeister, Baumeister, and I'll put it on the screen so you'll see how it's spelled. Bad is stronger than good is this subtitle of the study. Another one is the effects of visualization on goal achievement. The effects of visualization on goal achievement. The subtopic, from thought to action, effects of process versus outcome-based mental simulations and performance. This was done by Lynn B. Pham, Pham, and Shelley E. Taylor. This was done in 1999 and is published in Personality and Social Psychology. The summary states, the study revealed that visualization, particularly when focused on the process, improved motivation and success in achieving goals. Visualizing positive outcomes can lead to an increased likelihood of manifesting those outcomes. Again, visualizing positive outcomes can lead to an increased likelihood of manifesting those outcomes. We talk about this quite a bit on the podcast. And the reason I keep bringing this up and keep repeating myself is because it's necessary. It's necessary for you to hear. It's necessary for me to hear. Why? Because it is true. And sometimes when we are in these gray spaces in our lives and we don't feel like we're making any, progress, or there's not been any traction or any status update, it's important for us to continue to focus on positive outcomes, because science has proven to us that where that energy goes, where that focus goes, that type of energy flows. And eventually, you are more likely to get the desired outcome versus not. Okay? Let me get you one more. Mindfulness and reframing. This study was done by Kirk Warren Brown and Richard M. Ryan. Subcategory is the benefits of being present, mindfulness, and its role in psychological well-being. This is published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2003. So, the summary. The summary of this research supports the use of mindfulness as a technique for reframing your thoughts. And we've talked about reframing our thoughts here. It is the idea of changing perspectives of things that happen throughout your day and throughout your week and throughout your month and your life. Changing your perspective on these things. Maybe you previously had a negative perspective of something that happens, but reframing it to a positive one. So when that thought comes up again, it's a positive one, not a negative one. It's found that mindfulness practices significantly reduce negative thinking, anxiety, and depression while promoting well-being and also positivity. In addition to those scientific studies, I want to give you a few quotes from some metaphysical and spiritual leaders that support this as well. Let's start off with Deepak Chopra. A quote, he says, "You must find the place inside yourself where nothing is impossible." So his words encourage a inward journey. Okay, that's what we're all doing here, reminding us that aligning with our potential and positive possibilities starts from within. Since, we talked a little bit about Eckhart Tolle in our last podcast, let's get a quote from Eckhart. The quote is, "Whatever you think the world is withholding from you, you are withholding from the world." I actually heard this particular speech. Whatever you think the world is withholding from you, you are withholding from the world. So Tolle suggests here that the negativity that we project outward, is often a reflection of what we hold within ourselves. So by cultivating positive thoughts, we shift our perception, and in turn, we can shift our reality. Yesterday, we did a podcast on the things that, happen in our lives, the things that pop up. They're all good. They're all necessary for our well-being. And I talked in that podcast about how important it is for us. Everything really is perspective. Everything is perspective. There may be some more black and white things, a bigger group could agree that something is quote unquote good versus something that is quote unquote not good. But really, it's our perspectives that affect and really generate life experience. It's not anything tangible that I can think about, but it's your perspective of what is that mostly affects your life. It is your life. Your perspective is your life. So in this case, Eckhart says, what we're withholding, from the world, or what we believe the world's withholding from us, we're really withholding from the world. So we can project outward a reflection of what we hold within. So by cultivating positive thoughts, we shift our perception, and in turn, we can shift, i.e., change our reality. Let's go for one more, and let's do Napoleon. I'm sorry, let's do Neville Goddard, since we were talking about him earlier. Here's the quote, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, of your wish fulfilled, and observe the route that your thoughts take. Again, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. In other words, go to the end. What is it that you desire? Go in your imagination to that point. Achieve it at that level. And then see what your thoughts do. What route does your thoughts take? This quote speaks to the power of assumption and, of course, visualization, encouraging a shift from negative to positive thinking by focusing on desired outcomes, not undesired, desired outcomes. All right, so guys, these studies and these quotes, they do demonstrate that both scientific and spiritual community supports cultivating a positive mindset as opposed to a negative one, using visualization, using gratitude, and using mindfulness and meditation to really stay in that positive thought pattern. Let's talk about some daily practices that we can use in order to ensure that we are thinking more positively versus negative. Let me go back to the beginning. We started off talking about everyone is getting what they imagine. The question is, what are you imagining? I explained to you why it is easier for us to imagine more negative than positive things because it's biological and psychological. But now that you're aware of that, what can you do? What can I do, Kelly, to practice, daily practice, and promote more positive thinking in my life? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's what we're going to talk about. There are a couple of things that I have, but I want to hit two really hard. Number one, challenge automatic negative thoughts. Challenge the automatic negative thoughts. It's not the first time you've heard that. Here, it's called ANTS, A-N-T-S. When a negative thought surfaces, you ask yourself, is this thought fact or fear? It's very important for you to interrogate and to challenge the very first negative thought. Otherwise, another thought's going to come like it. Another thought's going to come like it. This is you understanding how your brain works, how your mind works. Okay, you are not your mind. Let's start there. You have a mind. You are not your body. You have a body. You are an awareness that is present only for a short period of time, and you are aware through this physical body of these things. So in this case, this is you thinking, but you can be aware of it. So when you see your thoughts turning negative, well, I know I'm not gonna. She's not going to say yes. They never say yes to me. I know she's not going to want to go on a date with me. I've got a history of being turned down or not having relationships that work out. So when you start hearing yourself say that sort of stuff to yourself, you got to stop it there. And you say, is this fact or fear? Here's an example. If you're worried about, failing in a new project, you can identify real evidence of actual failure, or you can just look at, I've always assumed I was going to fail and I didn't really fail. Just like the example I gave for the relationship. study. Make it a study. There are studies in cognitive behavior therapy that show that questioning your thoughts reduces their impact. You interrogate your thought, you can reduce the impact, particularly if it's negative. So that's number one. You can do that every day. When you feel or sense or hear negative self-talk, interrogate the thought, challenge the thought, and ask, is this fact or is it fear? After that, you replace it with a positive thought. Reframing, what we talked about a little earlier. The second thing is you can practice positive visualization. We've talked about that here on the podcast before. That one is a easy one for folks who are in this genre, in this line of thinking. Use the best case scenario exercise. This is the one I want to talk to you about. So let's talk about this one. Use the best case scenario exercise. You ever get a phone call late at night or early in the morning? You ever get a phone call from that one person that you're like, oh my God, what do they want now? That kind of stuff. Why? Why do we do that? Have you ever gotten a phone call from someone and got super excited like, yeah, they're going to tell me I won the lottery. Or yeah, this is my boss telling me that I've got a enormous raise and a new office or something like that. We don't go to the other extreme. And it actually seems kind of ridiculous. Why? I don't know. But we certainly don't have a problem going to the negative. What do they want now? Who's died? How much money do they want to borrow? All of that can come up in a negative, and it doesn't seem ridiculous. It seems very plausible. But the other side, not so much. We're going to cultivate a best case scenario mindset. When you find yourself imagining the worst, try this best case scenario exercise instead. Ask yourself, what would the best outcome look like? Even when you're in meetings with other folks, I have done this several times. I hear people say, well, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Or what's the worst case scenario? I said, listen, we are not planning for worst case scenario. We are planning for the best case scenario. Okay? We are planning for the best case scenario. So when you do this, what would be the best case scenario? What would that look like? Create a detailed mental picture of that. This can feel unnatural at first because you're not used to it. You're used to the pessimistic view of life. Flip it upside down. The more you practice it, the more you will refrain and retrain your brain to think of positive possibilities. Isn't that what you want? Positive possibilities. You want solutions, right? If you want to be embedded in problems, you can do that. But I would think an intelligent person actually wants a solution. So positive psychology research shows that visualizing success actually increases confidence and it lowers stress. That is very intuitive. If I felt more confident, I would feel less stressful. Mindful breathing techniques and engaging in gratitude journaling and training. Those are the last two things that you could do on a daily in order to, keep yourself in a positive mindset. But I know you know how to do those two things. So challenge the negative thoughts, interrogate them. I think this is going to be most effective. And then the second thing is that's going to be most effective is to implement a best case scenario in your mindset, in your life. Practice it every day. Each time you have the opportunity to consider end result to something, consider always the best case scenario. Consider the best case scenario. So guys, I hope this has been helpful for you today. I've learned a lot in preparing for this. And again, what are you imagining? Because we're all getting what we imagine. Use your imagination to your advantage. See your imagination as a spiritual partner, as a tool. As Neville Goddard said, this is God within you. And I really believe that on every level, that this is how everything is created. So it's important that we cultivate and we pay more attention to what we are imagining. Go ahead and subscribe, guys, if you've not done so already. If you want to shoot us a text message, do that. I would love to hear from you this week. And again, Jeannie, thank you so much for listening and for, sending us a message. And we look forward to hearing from you again and many more. Guys, come back, check us out on tomorrow. We'll have another great podcast for you then. Be safe, and I'll talk to you soon.